Hi everyone, it's Sharon here, and as promised in my monthly newsletter, I'm going to be sharing with you today some information about 2022. In actuality, it actually starts already. It started from September 2021 and it runs until September 2022. Now, although I have psychic abilities, it's not something I usually broadcast. And so it's not something I feel really comfortable doing a video on. However, it's so big and it's so important and it doesn't seem right to keep it to myself. So I'm trying to do this video today to share what I know with you. You can do with it whatever you like. Try not to focus on the negative and just focus on the positive. Because it is actually one of the greatest opportunities for everybody. And you'll see why I say that as we get into it. But the reason for sharing is basically to empower you and to help prepare yourself for what is this great opportunity that's coming. So, with that said, I have to kind of go back a little bit. And give you some background. So in about 2017, 2018, in one of my usual journaling and asking the universe lots of questions, I was sort of looking forward and I received information that 2020 was going to be the start of the great suffering that led to the Great Awakening. And I kind of foresaw that there was going to be quite a lot of suffering globally. And that was really hard for me back in 2018. I had this information and I asked what I think most people would ask. And that was, can we avoid the suffering and just go straight to the awakening? And I was told, really clearly that no. And the reason for that is that human beings tend not to evolve or change out of their own free will. But suffering acts as a catalyst for change and for self-growth. So the suffering leading to the Great Awakening, the great suffering leading to the Great Awakening, was a necessary part. So I thought about that and I thought, well, actually, there's no judgment from me on that. I think that's actually true. And now I do believe that to be true as well. Because, even myself, I'm on this path of healing and helping. And it took me to get very, very ill to be able to have the courage to change path. I kind of knew I wasn't on the right path, but I tried lots of times and I couldn't really quite figure it out. But having 4 years of being ill and having all the things I thought were important stripped away from me, it made the choice easier. So my illness did act as a catalyst, and the suffering, and I did suffer, act as a catalyst for change. So I can see how that's true now. And so I reconciled within myself that 2020 would be the start of the great suffering, but it would be okay because it would lead to the Great Awakening. So I kind of knew that 2020 would be hard. And just to be clear as well, the wording is it's the start of the great suffering. It's not a little bit of suffering and then it's all fine. It's the start of the great suffering. So I knew 2020 was going to be a tough year. I assumed, and I didn't really delve into it and ask a lot of questions because I kind of assumed that when I was told the start of the great suffering was 2020, I assumed it would be because we put ourselves into great environmental catastrophe. And surely there were environmental catastrophes happening in 2020 and onwards, and more are to come for sure. So I didn't really predict COVID. I never saw it coming. I wasn't really expecting it, but when it arrived, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of missed that. Okay, it was COVID. But that's just the start. So that's why I'm saying don't get too focused on the negative, because there is a great opportunity coming in 2022. So, but the great suffering leads to the Great Awakening, and I kind of knew that has been the case, and I've mentioned it a few times in my monthly calls as well. Great suffering leading to great awakening. So some of you may already be aware of this that I already knew about. So because I'd reconciled this a couple of years before it happened, I'm kind of gone back and I've done the same process with the prediction for 2022. So I realised that normally around this time of year, I kind of start to look towards what do I want my end of year to look like, and I wonder what's going to happen in the coming year. And I hadn't really started that process yet. And then my friend Alice seemed to be very gently acting as a messenger from the universe to be saying, I wonder what's happening next year. And so I sort of thought, okay, I'll sit down and I'll have a look and see what's happening for 2022. But what I hadn't really noticed it, but I had been kind of resisting it. And I noticed I'd been resisting it after Alice sort of prompted me a couple of times. And I thought, oh, clearly I'm resisting it for some unknown reason. So I'll have a look. And when I initially went and asked the universe about 2022, the initial words that were used that I received seemed on the surface to be quite negative. And I'm quite an empathetic human being. I kind of thought about how much we have suffered in 2020, 2021 through COVID and all the difficulties. And when I initially got the wording, I got a little bit depressed on everyone's behalf, on the globe's behalf. I didn't feel like it was really that relevant to me. I had a very interesting thing that came through for me. I thought it was specific to me. But on behalf of the rest of the world, I thought these are not the words people want to hear is coming up in 2022. So I got a little bit, I put it aside, moped around for a couple of days. And then knowing that I'd gone through a process similar in 2018 when I heard about the great suffering leading to the great awakening, I thought, right, well, if I resolve this within myself, I resolve it now, I'll find out all the details. Usually when I get more details and there's more clarity and I don't judge what comes through and I can see it for what it is, it usually turns out to be all right. So I went back and I asked for more information. And I'm going to share this with you. I've just got my journal here. I'm going to read directly from it in places. But I'm going to give you another explanation before I go on to what was said and what I received and what I want to share with you. I need to go and explain one thing. So I'm going to be talking about choice points. And the reason is that a long time ago when I was talking to the universe, the wording of a choice point came up. I'm not going to go into why I was asking about it, but if you've had a soul purpose reading with me, you will recognize the wording choice point because it is used by the universe to describe a particular moment when a particular choice was possible. So there's no judgment in the choice points, but if you take the truth of your life is made up by a series of choices that you make or don't make, or that you think you have or don't have, whether you make a choice or not, even not making a choice is still a choice, and if you see what I mean. So your life is made up of a series of choices, and certain choices are choice points. They're big choices, and you have a choice that is not in particular alignment with you, and then you have a choice point. You have a choice that is in perfect alignment with your soul purpose or with who you are or humanity as a collective. So we have these important choice points that come up, and the key thing to realize in the wording is that it is actually a choice. So when we have soul purpose readings, I offer some wording, and so that we can integrate that choice point into our timelines. So it's the act of choosing, consciously choosing something, and it's the integrating it and saying, yes, this is me and this is my choice in this lifetime. So choice points are really important points in our lives where we choose whether or not we're going to be in alignment with our true selves, our true nature. So hopefully that's nice and clear. So if I was going to give you the top headline, and I'm going to look down a little bit from now on because I'm going to get into the actual information that was provided. If I was going to give you a top headline of 2022, is that all of humanity is going to be given a very, very crucial and essential choice point. It starts from September this year, runs through to September 22. And this choice point has the potential to end your suffering and bring you into a new kind of, I don't want to say new reality, but it's an end of suffering by choosing to see the truth of something. And in choosing that, in saying yes to that choice and actually taking action to support that choice towards truth, rather than the illusion or the suffering or the narrative that the mind has been running for you, you will see the veil lifts and you will see the truth of a situation. And in that moment, you will get a choice. Do I go back to the suffering that the mind has created for me and carry on life like that? Or do you choose something different? Do you choose the truth, the actual truth of the situation, not what's been created by the mind? And in doing so, when you say yes to that choice, the positive truth choice, that's the awakening. That's the next leveling up of your consciousness level. So that's the top headline. And you know, this is a courageous choice that's going to happen. You're going to take courage to choose the truth rather than the mind's narrative story that it's been running. So, and I'm going to give you a lot more information about this, right? So this is just the top headline. But this is an opportunity for all human beings at any consciousness level to go up a level, to up level. Now, if you know anything about consciousness, or you've ever looked into it, or you've been trying yourself, you're a seeker on the path, you will know that most people don't go up a consciousness level in their lifetimes. Sometimes it takes many lifetimes. So we've been given an amazing opportunity to up our consciousness. And you might ask, well, why now? And it's like, well, as far as I can tell, we have reached a point of catastrophe. Literally, not just climatic catastrophe, but, you know, humanity is in crisis. And therefore, we're going to be given an opportunity that our awakening will lead to our survival and the rebalancing of Earth that needs to happen. So it's not just for yourselves, it's for everybody. We're doing this, everyone's going to get an opportunity. The more conscious you are, the more prepared you are, and that's why I'm doing the video, so that anyone who wants to be can be a bit more prepared. The greater your conscious, the more awareness you have around this, the more likely you are to see it. The less conscious you are, this opportunity might pass you by. You still see it, you still have it, it'll still be given to you, but whether or not you are aware that that was a choice, that choice seemed too hard, it seemed too scary, or you didn't realise that how important this choice was, it passed you by. That's why I'm letting people know about this. But everybody will be given a choice. Like this is like amazing. I've never known anything quite like it. So I'm going to start looking down and looking at my notes so that I can give you the correct wording that I received. So now, as I said at the beginning, it's the great suffering leading to the great awakening. So when I first got the information through, and I stopped because I got a bit upset and moped around for a little bit, it was because I got words that I judged, right? Now, if you don't judge these words and hold on to them, try not to judge them when you hear them as well. Don't make the same mistake I made. But if you hear these words, just recognize that as I go through this, you'll see that they're actually not as bad as they initially sound. So when I first heard disturbance, and 2022 would be all about disturbances and disruption, collapse and creation, and change in motion. And then I kind of got this sensation of an oasis of peace in the middle of turbulence. And I kind of heard all of this and thought, considering everything everyone's been through in the last couple of years, disturbance, disruption, collapse, and turbulence does not sound good. So I judged it. Please don't do that, because once we go through this and you get the more information, you'll hear and you'll be able to see for yourself how the disruption is going to be very necessary. The collapse is very necessary to create a new path for everybody. The disruption is actually a positive thing, because it's disrupting the narrative that the egoic mind has got being running in your life, maybe all your life, maybe short term, long term in terms of the collective of humanity. But we are going to have to disrupt that narrative, that story, the untruths that we have built into our society. And that's going to cause disturbance. And maybe it's required. I think it's probably required. So, and collapse. Again, suffering, if it's mild suffering, you're not going to do anything about it. You're not going to create a change. It's not going to say, oh, I've got a mild suffering and I've got a mild choice. Can't be bothered to do anything with any of that, right? So there is going to be a stark difference in experience. And so there may well be suffering. But if you think of suffering as created by the mind, it's the mind's perception that creates the suffering. So anything that you're feeling suffering about isn't necessarily, I don't want to say it's not true, but on one level it's an illusion created by the mind based on perception. And truth can kind of set you free from that, kind of to strip away the untruths in that perception, and what's left is truth, right? So I think probably all of this is necessary for society as a whole, as humanity as a whole. We need to strip away the untruths of capitalism and our need to have everything, and social media and everything that cause us to have mental health issues amongst everything else. So we need some disruption. So try and focus on it as a necessary part to get us to the next level. So I'm going to start reading from my journal. This is my own personal journal, and I may read actual parts and I might just paraphrase certain parts as well. So I will be looking down a little bit, so forgive me for that, but I just want to make sure that I'm accurate in what I'm sharing with you. So as well, I should mention that where I received this from is from my master teachers. I've got some new teachers who've come in to offer me assistance. I usually speak to my guide, Elizabeth, but this came from my master teachers. So I'll read you a little bit from here. This is right from the beginning, and so to be helpful, one of the things that will help you identify when you have this choice point that comes up is that there will be you'll be experiencing something that you would say is difficult, challenging, upsetting, and you may well ask yourself the question, how did we come to this, or how did I get here? That kind of real kind of self-questioning of how did it come to this? So that might be on a collective level, there might be on an individual level, but everyone at some point will be sort of asking this question, like almost like how did I let this happen? Something around that kind of self-questioning of, I can't believe this is happening. How did I get here? So this will be in situations all across the spectrum of life. So I'm going to read here. In all situations across the spectrum of life, the veil will be lifted and people will glimpse will have a glimpse at and see something new that maybe they think of as new. They think, oh, I've never looked at it like this before. I've never seen this before. And it might be kind of like, oh, I've never experienced this before. That's the choice point. When you feel that feeling, that's that choice point. And the reason I say that as well is that because it feels new, but it's always been there because it's truth-based. So the truth has always been there, but you may never have seen it. So suddenly you may go, how did I ever get here? And the experience will be, well, actually, and you can suddenly see the truth of a situation. Okay, and it's only the mind, which is the source of suffering, which kind of has obscured the truth of how did we get here? Why am I in this situation? How am I feeling like this? How can this be happening? And suddenly you will be able to see the truth of that situation. So the mind's power will be disrupted, suspended, and you'll be able to see the truth of your situation. Okay? And that's where you will get, and this is gonna, for those who love the film The Matrix, you're in for a treat. Because this is the analogy my master teachers gave me. It will be a real choice of take the red pill or take the blue pill. It really is like in the Matrix film. So the red pill is about breaking the illusion, ending your suffering and going on to a new way of being. That does involve you making that choice, taking that red pill and making changes. You can't just say yes to it and then just do nothing. It involves creating change. So when you make that choice, when you see the truth, you have to make a courageous choice. Or you just take the blue pill and you just carry on as if you never got the option. That's what the suffering is. So the great suffering leading to the great awakening, you either awaken out of the dream and the illusion and the suffering, and you move on to the awakened state where there is less suffering, there's more empowerment, there's greater truth, or you take the blue pill and you just carry on as you are. Okay? And this is why it's a choice point, and this is why I say it all the time. Your life is made up of a series of choices, so choose wisely. This is the ultimate one. This is really where this comes into its own, because the universe can't force any awakening onto anybody. I know obviously you wouldn't want to. Everyone has to evolve at their own time, their own pace, and they have to have that wanting or that desire to seek the truth. We call ourselves truth seekers for a reason, right? To seek the truth and to end our suffering. So, it's a choice. So everyone's going to be given an opportunity to make that choice. Okay. So the obviously in that scenario, the blue pill, where you go back to seeing everything the way the mind has portrayed everything, society as it is, don't want to rock the boat, don't want to make any changes, just going to get on with how it is. That's obviously the less empowered choice. That's not the one that's most aligned. And it won't end your suffering, right? The empowered choice obviously is to make the courageous choice, see the truth, take some action based on that truth, to end your own suffering. Another way of saying that is to up your consciousness level to a place where you can understand that the difference between what the mind is saying and a more objective reality underneath that. Okay. So yes, there will be disruption to the narrative that our minds have been telling us. Yes, there will be disturbances emotionally, mentally, physically, but that is the potential for that's the potential where the awakening can occur. Everyone's going to get it. Okay, so how might you know if this is your choice point? So a key part to say as well is that when you get the experience of your choice point, suffering, how did we get to this point? How is this happening to me? All that kind of questioning. When you get to that point, the veil will lift. Okay, I'll explain that in a bit more in detail in a moment. The veil will lift and you'll get a choice. But this is really important. You only get a few minutes to choose. Now, don't think I didn't ask this question, because I did ask the question and I'm going to give you the answer. I asked straight away, why only a few minutes? And the reason is they can't have the whole of humanity in limbo over long periods of time. The veil lifts, you get a choice like you would in any other choice. You get a choice to sort of decide what you want to do with that. It has to be a choice. It cannot be given to you. You kind of have to choose it. Because that's the empowered choice. So you'll only have a few minutes to choose it. You'll choose which way you want to go, and so you just know that it's you don't get days to decide. you get minutes in human time. Okay, so the raising of the veil. So to describe that a little bit more. Oh, I should say as well that I did ask about, because we kind of, the choice comes out of suffering, and what happens if that suffering is quite shocking. So, and like you've only got a few minutes, and how is that going to be enough for people to choose? And how it was explained to me was that while something is very shocking, or maybe shocking to you, or maybe sort of gives you a moment where I don't know what to do in this situation, the veil will lift, you'll see the truth, and it will be really kind of clear that the mind has run one thing and the universe is offering you the truth, a different version. So you kind of will be able to see that there's two different versions in front of you, and you don't need to be scared about that suffering. You don't need to be scared about that situation, because as soon as you are in that situation, the truth kind of has a loving radiance. It has it's truth. It comes out of the source of all things. So it has a radiance and a lovingness to it. And you will probably, most people will find it probably quite easy to embrace the loving truth and just kind of see the suffering for what it is, which is an untruth. So don't be too scared about what that suffering may be. I'm using the word suffering because that is the correct word that I've been offered, and it is correct description. But just keep in mind that suffering comes from the mind's ideas. It's not actually a truth. Okay, so. So I asked then, obviously the next question I asked was, will everyone's suffering be quite dramatic? So, at the start I said, 2020 is the start of the great suffering. Will it be everything like great floods, great fires? People have already experienced that. Will it always be very dramatic? And I was told that no, it won't always be. Everyone's suffering is very different. Everyone's mind narratives are quite different. So that's the identification of what that suffering is going to be is determined by your kind of life experiences and your narrative that needs to be broken and the truth revealed by. So there's kind of two parts to it. So it's sort of like your suffering will... You probably already know what you suffer from, right? You already know the things that upset you. You know the things that take up a lot of mind energy and space and density in your life, right? So that's usually a bit of a clue as to where the suffering is, because it's already existing within you. And then you might also have this other part of you that kind of longs for something on the soul or heart level. And that is where the truth will be revealed from and leading you towards. So I give myself as an example is, So I asked, what will be what's my choice going to be? And my choice was told to me that my choice will be peace. And I kind of think I'm quite peaceful, right? So I was kind of like, oh, is it not love? Am I not leaning towards sort of being unconditionally loving? And the universe my master teacher kind of said to me, what do you bang on about most? And I'm like, oh, enlightenment, this, and what's that? And I'm like, oh yeah, peace, right, okay. So, so my choice, I know, is going to be peace based. So what would be the opposite of the peace based is lack of peace. What gives me lack of peace? And that's where I would go down to kind of look to maybe where my where my suffering might live, might dwell at. So therefore my choice will probably be based in that, if that gives you some kind of idea. So for some people, yes, it might be natural disaster. For some people, it may be like a loss of material possessions, because what they actually may really long for is freedom, and they don't realise that the material possessions are the source of their suffering, not the source of their freedom as they first thought. So maybe when the veil lifts and the truth is revealed, they will actually realise they have more freedom without a lot of these material possessions. That's just an example. So I have no idea what everyone's example is going to be. I have no intention of trying to guess everyone's example. Don't ask me. I don't know what yours is. I only barely know what mine is. But if you want to prepare, then maybe go and look for this. Look at what you think creates suffering for you, and what you yearn for as opposition to that, maybe, or in conjunction with that. So, okay. So another question I asked, because it was said that everyone would get a choice point. I said, so for example, so this was an example I used, and that was, say for example, two people are in a marriage or in a relationship, and say they're having an argument, and for one person, or maybe even both of them, that source of the argument is causing great unhappiness, and they sort of think to themselves, how did we get here in our marriage? How did we get here? Why is this happening? I long for love, and yet I'm in a massive argument with my beloved. Okay, so I asked, will both people get the choice point at the same time? Because that seems to be almost a simultaneous choice point that they both make. And I was told, no, it doesn't quite work that way. So everyone's choice point will be individual. Maybe that person, one person has a choice point right in that moment, and the other person in that argument has a choice point later on, because everyone experiences and perceives everything differently. So they may be at different places in that, even though they're having the same argument, they might be in different places. So you can't predict when and how your choice point is going to come. You just know it's going to come, and just have the awareness to kind of go, right, well, if I'm suffering something sort of emotionally, mentally, physically, and it's something that maybe you've had a fear around it already, or maybe you've had some drama around it already, or maybe you might even have been quite oblivious, but it's somewhere within you, you've got a fear of it, and then you have an experience of it, and in that experience you have that moment of clarity that, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was. Like sometimes you have a fear and you go, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. Why isn't it as bad as I thought it was? Oh, the truth suddenly reveals itself to you. That kind of thing. So, so everyone's is very different. Everyone's going to experience it in their own way. It's not necessarily going to be synchronized. It's not going to be necessarily predictable. But it's just really about having the presence and awareness to notice when it arrives. So, because you've only got a few minutes to decide. So, so I'll read you this, because this is quite interesting, because it will maybe help you identify. So I was told, so the choice point is based on suffering and surrender. The suffering and surrender axis is what they said. usually when suffering is unbearable, there is a natural surrender of the mind, and as the mind surrenders its narrative, effectively, the truth floods in, and the mind's illusion is broken. That's usually what happens. So what I was told that in 2022, or from now until September, end of September 2022, the mind's hold of the illusion will have its grasp loosened by the truth. So it's almost like the truth is kind of coming in, and the mind's grip on its narrative, its story, its belief system that is kind of propping up all these other untruths, they're being loosened. So the mind technically, normally when, say you have a dark night of the soul and you're truly at despair, when you despair, you surrender. Most people just go, I can't take this anymore. I don't know what else to do. Like people pray at that point, God help me, I don't know what to do. At that point, the mind gives up. The mind surrenders it and says, actually, I don't know what to do either, right? And then the truth floods in, and you have this epiphany, you have this wonderful moment. And the mind actually does that surrendering as well. However, it's not quite like that, because the mind isn't going to fully surrender. The veil will lift, so it will be loosened for you to see it. So when the grip is loosened on the narrative, the story, the suffering, the beliefs, the whatever you created, the truth will be offered, and the choice point at that point is presented. You'll see the truth, you'll see the lie, and you get to decide. Now, it sounds really straightforward, but it may be that you're on the wrong path, right? Or wrong path, but you're on a path that isn't aligned to who you are, truly who you are. So it sounds really simple when I say it like that, but you might be miserable in your job and you don't know what else to do, but you can see the misery, you're really upset, something will upset you, I don't know. And then the veil lifts and something kind of says to you, oh, you're not on the right path, you're meant for something else. The truth comes in, and then you have to decide. But you only have minutes, right? You only have minutes. So that truth that you're on the wrong path and there's a better path for you is there available. There's the path that that this job isn't really for you, and you're just miserable. But in that moment, you haven't got like hours to decide or days to decide. So in that moment, it is a courageous choice to say, I don't know what I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but that's the truth. That's the truth. I'm going to follow that. And you make a choice to say, right, okay, I'm going to look for another job, or I'm going to give this up, or I'm going to retrain, or I'm going to do something else. But it's only minutes. Normally you might take longer than that, right? You might be in a relationship and you may be longing for freedom. That might be the cause of your suffering. You might think, I need some freedom from this person, right? In that moment, though, you might discover that the narrative that you've been running, that you need freedom from that person because they're the source of all your unhappiness, the truth might come in and say they're not the source. You're the source. And then you have to, the courageous decision might be you were going to leave, or you were thinking of leaving. The courageous decision might be to stay. Equally, reverse that around, and the freedom that you seek is outside of that relationship. The freedom that you seek might be actually in the relationship. There's no way of knowing. I've got no way of knowing what's happening in your relationship, right? But this is the reason why I say we have to just start to have some awareness around what is the suffering, what are we longing for, what is it that the mind is tormenting us with, effectively, right? That might be a way to just start the preparation process of being able to see what's going to truly show up for us. So okay. So I did ask as well. I'm a born optimist, right? So I'm like, hey, is this going to change society really fast? Is there's going to be lots of waking up? And there's a lot of people who aren't even awakened will be awakened and first step onto the path. Those of us who are further down the path, hurrah, we get up to the next level. Isn't the world going to be a better place? And the answer is kind of, yeah, it will be. but it's not going to seem so miraculous straight away. And the reason is that I'm just trying to see how they described it to me. That those who choose to stay in the illusion of the suffering will continue under this illusion, and their minds will carry on with that illusion, and their suffering will continue. Those who choose the truth become part of the Great Awakening, and they step further away from the great suffering. So, there's 7 billion people on the planet, right? Some people are not even going to notice this choice, right? And even if they saw it, they might the mind is very powerful. It just goes, oh yeah, that was a moment, but no, I don't believe that's true. No, let's carry on with what we're doing. That we know about, this we don't know about. So we're not going to necessarily see a massive straightaway change. But for those who have chosen to step away further from the great suffering, we're not going to go into completely different reality or anything like that. I did ask, thought it was worth checking. It's not quite like that, but it's a step. People are taking a step that maybe they would have never taken in their lifetimes, to see that there's a choice in life between truth and untruth, between ego and spirit, or ego and heart, love versus fear. We have a choice in all of this, and the seeing of that choice in a really clear way, and choosing the truth, choosing spirit rather than mind, choosing not the ego, choosing love over fear. All of this is really, really important, and all of this collectively will be really important. And I think also, once you've had a glimpse, and those on the spiritual path will know this, once you've had a glimpse, it kind of pulls you towards, like, I want another glimpse. Oh, I can see there was a choice there. How am I going to get another experience of that? What else have I missed? And so it sets you along a path of inquiry that will lead to great change. That's why 2022 is disruption. It's disrupting the narrative. It's disrupting the story. And it will create disturbance. It will create turbulence. But in a good way, in a way that leads to something better. And I don't want to say better. I try not to use the word better, because better has a judgment in it of good and bad, right and wrong. Not better, but more evolved, or higher consciousness, or a more loving path for us all. So if you are a coach, teacher, guide, anything like that, helper of any kind, you'll be up leveling, which is the great news. Those of you who kind of follow me and my work, you will know that I've been told very clearly by the universe to move out of healing into teaching about power. You probably have heard me talk about it a lot. This is the reason. So now maybe you can kind of see, why is Sharon moving from healing? And she says she loves healing, but why is she moving from healing to teaching power? And that's because there's going to be, not just for myself, why I'm teaching power, but for everybody else who are on the healing, helping path, there's going to be a lot more questioning. And I think we need a lot more questioning in society. There's going to be more exploration by people. So as the veil lifts, a new choice is made, the suffering as a catalyst for change, more people are going to be looking for answers. And those who have further along the path, this is your choice, this is your opportunity to help those behind you with their paths, and being more aligned, and helping those to create change. So and I'm going to say this, you will hear me say this probably a lot in the future, because I'm be teaching power, and one of them is that women, we all need to stand up more. And that's become really clear and obvious that is happening anyway, but just to be aware of that. To really understand the true nature of power is going to become really, really important. Because if we're going to create change, and we're going to create change for a more equal, fairer world, we have to understand power in a more deeper way. And leadership is going to become, the types of leadership that, and the people in positions of leadership. Notice I'm not saying positions of power, because I refuse to use the word power incorrectly. Power is a spiritual attribute. It is not what we call power in society. What we call power in society is authority, and it's usually the abuse of authority. And I refuse to call it power, because it's not true power. True power is spiritual, and it's based in love, peace, and joy. So if we don't understand that, we're never gonna take steps toward real change. So if you're in a helping, if you have a desire to help, if you have a desire to help people onto a more loving, more peaceful, more joyous path, and help create change, then 2022 and onwards is where you're going to be really needed. That's why we have to step up and step into our true power. Okay, so I think that kind of covers it. So hopefully that gives you all the information that I've got so far. And I hope you find that empowering, and it gives you a sense of empowerment to know that something great is coming, and to not really fear the suffering that comes. You know, I'm a great believer in looking for the gift in adversity, and I am not somebody who thinks that adversity is a bad thing. I actually think adversity is a good thing, genuinely, even before this information about the choice points came through. And the reason is that adversity teaches us a lot of things, and usually what it teaches, there's a gift in every kind of challenge, and it teaches us something, and that evolves us. Hopefully, if we're paying attention, it evolves us, and that makes us into brings us into closer alignment to who we truly are. So we become more of our true self. We peel away the layers of untruths around us and inside of us, and what's left is beautiful and amazing. So adversity has the gift of transformation usually included in it. So I'm like everyone else. I'm a normal human being. When I first heard it, I thought, oh God, disruption and and disturbance and suffering, and something might be quite shocking. It may be quite shocking. Oh, what could it be? I don't want it to be this, or I wouldn't like it for it to be that. And then I just stopped and I was like, whatever it is whatever it's meant to be. So don't be too fearful. It's much easier to be in acceptance and non-resistance. Fear is of the mind. The fear of you can't avoid this choice point, because it's been given to humanity as a gift. You can't avoid the choice point, right? You can't say, well, I'm just going to stay in the house for the rest of the year, not see anyone, not do anything, and I'll be fine. This is life. This is how we live. Adversity happens. Suffering happens. Because our minds are constantly chit-chattering basically rubbish to us all the time. So, this is part of life, and mastering that fear and saying, okay, I know something difficult's coming up next year. Well, something difficult would probably have been coming up anyway, whether you know it or not. It would be happening anyway. So we can't spend our whole lives in avoidance of or resistance to difficult situations. We can try, but it's only going to create, more suffering, right? So when we accept something, we can then have a neutrality towards it. So, okay, suffering is coming. All right, that's fine. I'm not going to resist it. When it comes, I know there's a gift. I'll look for that gift. I'll have a choice. It's going to be a beautiful choice. It's going to change my life, and it's going to be beautiful, right? Instead of going, oh, I hope it's not this. I don't want it to be that. This is why I'm offering this, to empower you to prepare and reconcile and come into acceptance with whatever shows up, however that shows up for you. Because resistance, when you resist something, I'm just going to finish on this just in case it's helpful. When you resist something, right? So there's two forces. There's you, let's say, and there's something that you don't like. When you resist it, it's a reaction to something, right? If it, right, this is whatever you don't like, this is you say, I don't like it, I'm going to run away from it, I'm going to do whatever, or I'm going to fight it, whatever. But when you are in resistance to something, i.e. you're not accepting it, what happens is it's a reaction. So in terms of power dynamics, you become the less powerful because something has made you change your behavior, avoid, not accept, confront, fight, push against, pull. You're in a power dynamic with that thing. But if we actually just accept something, it's not in reaction to it. You are still doing whatever you want to do, and you are aware of the existence of the other thing. You accept it, and then you can then choose. You're not reacting. You are just choosing what you're doing from moment to moment. And that's the power of choice, is choosing based on your own inner wisdom and inner knowledge, your own path, what you want to do and how you want to be. It's not in relation to the thing you are resisting. So I hope that's kind of clear. So if we have fear, we're usually in resistance to something, right? You're scared of something, so you want to, what are our fear mechanisms? We want to run away, we want to fight, or we just freeze, we become overwhelmed and we can't do anything, or we collapse, right? So all of those fears are in reaction to something that hasn't happened yet. So because it hasn't happened, we have a choice. We can just choose. We choose now. We don't wait till most fears never actually ever happen, right? So we are taking control over our choices in our lives by not resisting things that show up for us. Instead of resisting them, we say, okay, if this shows up for me, it shows up for me. It's meant for me. It's meant for me to resolve. You'll find it easier to resolve it if you don't resist it, right? Because fighting something, fleeing from it, or freezing is not resolution. It's not really going to resolve it in the most beneficial way for you. But if you accept it, takes the emotion out of it, you accept it, you can then look at it objectively, look at all your choices, and then make a choice. And it's a much more peaceful way to live our lives than be reactionary all the time from our fears. So I hope you don't take the negative part of that, which is the suffering, and try and resist whatever it is, but actually come into acceptance. I always say acceptance is the doorway to all the good stuff. And it is so true. Like, acceptance is the starting point from which we kind of go, okay, well, this is coming. This is what I'm doing. This is what's currently happening in my experience. Okay, well, if I accept it with love, peace and joy, and going, something good will come out of this because that's going to be my choice. We have greater control over our lives and greater power in our lives. So I'm going to end it there. I hope you found it useful. Like I've said before, this is not something I like to do. It's not something, I feel quite vulnerable having shared all of this. But I hope you find it useful and helpful. And that's the reason for sharing. So thank you very much for listening.